Toshio Matsumoto's 1969 film Funeral Parade of Roses is, to say the least, an introspective, confrontational, innovative, and queer retelling of Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex. The film was made during an era of Japanese film called Japanese New Wave, similar to French New Wave that it falls from 1950 up until the 1970s. It looks at themes that are considered taboo and experimented with its storytelling. Funeral Parade of Roses is a staple of the movement. Characteristically, compared to other and more faithful adaptations, it moved its focus onto Tokyo's underground gay culture and added different aspects of Freudian and Lacanian psychoanalysis to move the story. Looking at this, I want to answer the question: how does Matsumoto use elements of psychoanalysis in Funeral Parade of Roses to depict the internal and external conflict of the characters? To accurately be able to look at the more engaging topics of psychoanalysis, it is helpful to understand the basics of the film. Funeral Parade of Roses follows main character Eddie, who is a transgender woman working at a gay bar in Tokyo's nightlife. The story focuses on her relationship with bar owner Honda, the bar's madame or lead hostess Ida, and jumps back and forth between the present and the past, where we see Eddie's upbringing with her mother after her father left the picture. One of the first speaking roles from Eddie's mother is when she is talking about how it had been 12 years since Eddie's father had abandoned them. Interestingly enough, Eddie replies with,
父さんのことなんかいいじゃないか。棒がついてんだろ。
I believe, especially in the clip showing younger Eddie, there are elements of the traditional Oedipus complex where his son loves their mother. Christian Metz says in The Imaginary Signifier, in those of its features that are directly related to the precise social facts and change when the latter change. In psychoanalysis, the various historical variants of the Oedipus complex, or perhaps the Oedipus complex itself, which is far from being the whole of psychoanalysis, which are clearly linked to the development of the institution of the family. It was necessary to first show this relationship between Eddie and her mother, because it depicts that within the character there are already elements of her experiencing this complex. This is one part of the film where it diverts from the source material, because in the original play, Oedipus has no recollection or previous relationship with his mother or father. This also brings to mind an element brought up by James Phillips in his essay Anti-Oedipus, The Ethics of Performance and Misrecognition in Matsumoto Toshi's Funeral Parade of Roses. Eddie navigates between two tragic revelations. He does not fall under the power of the revelation of Oedipus, in which the semblance of good fortune is exchanged for the truth of the incestuous infamy. After being seen with lipstick and kissing their reflection, Eddie's mother catches her and begins to hit her over and over. In all of the clips featuring young Eddie, there's never one good moment. Whether it includes being ridiculed, abused emotionally, and perhaps sexually, these actions are possibly what leads to the next scene, which is when she kills her mother. There are small glimpses of it throughout the film, but when the full thing is shown, it starts with the viewer looking at Eddie's mother and her lover flirtatiously going up the stairs. We, the viewers, for a few seconds, are taking on the primary identification, but then switch when the camera reveals that what the viewers had been seeing was not the camera's vision, but was Eddie's point of view. After seeing them go upstairs, Eddie grabs a large kitchen knife and begins her slow ascent of the stairs. Undercut with the lack of music, this scene is eerily creepy. Eddie reaches the top of the stairs while hearing her mother and the man giggle while being in a vulnerable position. This is quite literally an example of a primal scene, which Freud describes as the first time a child sees their parents, without the parents' knowledge, being intimate. Eddie watches for a long time. It jumps to the present where viewers can see that she is distraught by the memory. Cutting back, Eddie kicks the door open and... After pushing the man down the stairs, Eddie looks at her mother and stabs her, paralleling the scene where her mother hit her over and over again. Eddie stabs her multiple times. The camera positioning when Eddie commits matricide is interesting because it is at a high angle, and instead of showing the stabbings, Eddie's back blocks the view. The initial stab is also blocked by the focus on Eddie. The importance of the murder is not on the phallic-like nature, but is focused on Eddie and how they react and their movement. The usage of a high angle helps viewers understand that Eddie feels and or felt powerless, and the only way not to is to do the unthinkable. Thomas Schmidt says, this is further supported when we see Eddie murder his mother and her lover. Eddie switches from being predominantly a victim to being a perpetrator. In this murder scene, this change becomes clear. Furthermore, according to Lily Pavlinovic's essay, The Primal Scene, The Enigma of Knowing, the initial reaction from a child after witnessing such a thing is to either A, like Eddie, commit parricide, or B, commit suicide. Eddie chose the latter, but why? I believe its purpose is to depict Eddie's internal need for power and her prowess towards violence. The last scene of the film shows when Honda discovers that he and Eddie are parent and child. Honda, while looking through a book, which has continuously been shown throughout the film, called Return of the Father, is where he sees a family picture with Honda's cigarette-burned face, a young Eddie, and her mother. Shocked by the discovery, Honda decides to not directly tell Eddie of his discovery and instead commit suicide via stabbing to the neck. Eddie, after witnessing the scene, deduces the truth from remembering the dolls that Ida laid out, her mother, and the photo, which then Eddie blinds herself. This entire scene is filled with close-up shots of Eddie and Honda's reaction, similar to the close-up sex scene between them in the previous clip. All of the sex scenes are filmed up close, and another thing filmed up close for the first time is Eddie's blinding. Though viewers can see the blood from Honda and the mother's death, Eddie's is the first time, and only time, that there is a close, in-detail shot of the violence. After the blinding, Eddie then walks outside, creating a spectacle from her blinding. She is covered in blood and can't see the outside world, but it can see her in her most vulnerable state. Alone, gawked at, betrayed, and fooled. The mythic components of Funeral Parade of Roses and Freudian psychoanalysis nonetheless function in different ways in answer to different tasks, since Matsumoto calls upon myth not to shed light where darkness otherwise prevails, but rather to derange, to falsify, and to draw blood.